in case you guys thought that now that Kamala Harris is the front runner for the DNC as of right now, that this is all said and done and this is exactly what it's going to look like by the time we get to the election, you are wrong. And I want to cover why that is. I have not made my official astrology prediction for the election as of yet. The reason being is there's so much happening between now and November that I want to wait for a few more things to happen, namely this Mercury retrograde transit. So to cover this real fast, everything from, I don't believe Donald Trump's assassination attempt was when Mercury was in shadow. Let me double check. No, it was not. But Joe Biden dropping out of the race and Kamala Harris becoming the front runner, this all happened while Mercury was in shadow. This Mercury retrograde cycle is squaring Uranus. Very disruptive, very big things happening that you wouldn't necessarily anticipate. And Mercury's not even retrograde yet. So I don't know if I'm fully convinced that Kamala Harris is going to be the person who's running, because this is all happening during this Mercury retrograde event. And we're going to see what happens at the DNC. The other reason, too, is if you ask any normal person what year is it, they're going to say 2024. But ask any historian what year is it, and they're going to say it's 1968. If you're a nerd like me, there's been so many repeated things about 1968 in this year. And we do know that in 1968, there were mass riots at the DNC in Chicago, which is where it's happening in August. I'm not fully convinced that Kamala is going to be the front runner. Now, I had recorded a video, I believe yesterday. I'm not actually going to put it out, but let me just go over this because I was kind of all over the place in my thinking. So I just kind of wanted to focus in for a minute. Looking at Kamala's chart, a lot of people think it's really, really strong. I'm mainly looking at her zodiac releasing. She's in an L1 and an L2 peak period. However, she does have Saturn on the midheaven and night chart. Abraham Lincoln did have that, so there is some sort of interesting quality there. But it's not necessarily my favorite chart. Same thing when it comes to Donald Trump's chart. The thing I can't get out of my head is the fact that he has not hit his L1 peak period till April of 2025, which I made in a previous video about the Supreme Court and Donald Trump and things like that. I wonder if he actually gets assassinated during this time. And I did have a comment on one of my last live stream videos about how I was talking about the Mars-Uranus conjunction on Donald Trump's midheaven, and that could be a sign of, that was symbolic of him having that assassination attempt. Now, what was really interesting is someone else said that when he enters this peak period, April of next year, that is the next time that Uranus will be on his midheaven. So part of me is wondering if that is when it kind of, the job kind of gets done at that point. But nonetheless, the reason I'm making this video right now is I want to show you guys an article. Now, I've told people that I am off Twitter, and unfortunately, I have a very I look like a bot on Twitter, and it's very unfortunate that I'm scrolling on. I feel like I'm back on drugs. It's just so bad. But you do kind of find some interesting things. My prediction for the election so far has been, I really believe we're going to go in a contingent election. When you look at the scenario that we're in this country, Donald Trump is extremely popular. And Kamala Harris, again, while there's this energy behind her now, which doesn't make any sense given that she's a cop, she was literally turned down. She couldn't get one delegate in the 2020 election. One of the most, hated vice presidents in history. All of a sudden, she's now the best thing ever. We have no policy from her, nothing like that, but she's a black woman. I guess she's not black anymore. It's just one of those things, too, where, again, it's just a bunch of utter nonsense. But, people are like, oh, my God, black lady, yes, queen, no look at policy. But we do see that this huge ramp up. The way I look at this is there's a really fine, delicate balance between there being an election that can be meddled with very easily or not. And for anyone who's on the left wing who might get upset at me about talking about the elections possibly being rigged, the left started this with Hillary Clinton. She sowed the seeds that Russia meddled in the election and that Donald Trump was captured by Russia, was paid off by Russia, and that Russia meddled this. Even though all of that was literally proven false. In fact, the Steele dossier, which was paid for by the Clinton campaign, was found to be literally fabricated lies, which, by the way, she did not go to prison for, nothing about that. But again, Trump has 34 felony counts of stuff that you couldn't even tell me otherwise. So why I'm saying this too is, like, I understand I am harsh on the left sometimes, but why I am that way is you have to be able to wake up to see that your party as well is lying to you and that not everything you're told is truth. And it blows my mind that we still live in this world. And again, the same thing for the right too. The difference with the right is they're more accepting of it in certain things. Like, again, the whole, like, we love Israel, we're going to just support Israel the whole time is very, like, boy, you haven't looked into that more than just what it is on the surface. But nonetheless, why I'm bringing this up is if you really think that we just have simply free and fair elections in this country, I think you're kind of wrong. And I don't think that's really a safe position to have. What's been a very easy working philosophy I've had is just to literally believe the opposite of what the mainstream media is telling you. And you kind of end up right 9 times out of 10. Mainstream media said anything about masks, didn't really need it. That turned out to be true. Same thing with, you could just literally add everything else. But why am I bringing up this topic? I think that we're going to be seeing some version of a contingent election. The reason I say that, and we're going to go over the astrology here in just a second, is the astrology is so nasty. And it's not even like the worst astrology. It's not like COVID, right? Like the COVID astrology was like Saturn, Pluto, destruction. This is like, oh, we don't get anyone that we voted for. And no one voted for Kamala Harris, by the way, which is the very undemocratic. And I think it's important to accept that. Like, Bernie Sanders was supposed to be the nominee for both 2016 and 2020, and that was subverted. But nonetheless, let's read this article that just came out 2 days ago. So CISA and FBI released joint PSA, public service announcement. I know what that acronym stands for. Putting potential DDoS attacks during the 2024 election cycle in context. Washington, today, as a part of their public service announcement series for the 2024 election cycle, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, jointly released, just so you know, DDoS attacks could hinder access to election information, but it wouldn't not prevent voting. This public service announcement is to raise awareness that distributed denial of service, DDoS attacks, on election infrastructure or adjacent infrastructure that supports election operations could hinder public access to election information, but would not impact the security or integrity of election process. Okay, so what they're telling you is, you know, who ends up winning and where the votes are coming from, it's going to get hacked and we're not really going to know, but your vote is completely safe and secure. You know, it's one of those things where I know I'm not dumb enough to believe that. Do you know what I mean? But I feel like maybe I have too high of standards for people when I think like, oh, you're not going to fall for that, right? But a lot of people will fall for that. They're telling you that your vote is completely 100%, you know, it's never going to be hacked. But information on, you know, the election and who's going to win and whatever, that's going to be, you know, probably attacked and we're just not going to know. Isn't that incredible? The reason I'm saying that is, again, I almost feel like we're not even going to have an election. I mean, when you kind of think of it, if Kamala Harris does end up becoming the DNC nominee, no one really voted for her. And again, what does that say about the party that's all about, you know, democracy and saving democracy? It's been like, what, 8 years? 8 years since y'all had, or really actually Obama. So it's been more of like 12 years. But this is incredibly important information, and I'm going to go over the astrology of this in just a moment. The PSA is a part of the agency's ongoing commitment to provide the public with information about the election infrastructure community with the support that they need to run safe and secure elections. Let's see if there's anything else here. With election day less than 100 days away, it's important to help put into context some of the incidents that the American public may see during the election cycle that, while potentially causing some minor disruptions, will not fundamentally impact the security or integrity of the democratic process. That's so interesting that, and this is my thing is, okay, so there's DDoS attacks, so there can be attacks on the information that's being put out, but not the information itself, not the data itself. Like, that's like saying I can hack the email in your computer, but I couldn't actually hack your computer. I can there's quite a few ways I could think of that, but DDoS attacks are one example of a tactic that have been seen used against election infrastructure in the past and will likely see again in the future, but they will not affect the security. See, this is the third time they've said that. They will not affect the security or integrity of the actual election. It is safe and effective. The liquor stores are essential to being open, but not the schools. They may cause some minor disruptions or prevent the public from receiving timely information. Oh, you're just not going to know. We're just not going to know. It might be a couple days. We're just the most powerful nation in the world, the richest nation in the world, but we're just not going to know. So they're sowing that seed right now. They're prepping us, which is what they do. They give you an idea of what's coming up. So this is all stuff. So again, if anyone does question the results of the election, some, actually person could be like, well, they actually read a joint statement that they were kind of expecting this, rather than actually holding these, systems that are so important in one of the most contentious elections that our lifetimes will see to a higher standard of being able to operate. It is important to talk about these potential issues now because nefarious actors like our foreign adversaries or cyber criminals, the foreign adversary, I might just put domestic adversary, could use DDoS incidents to cast doubt on the election system or process. As an informed public is key to neutralizing the impact of foreign influence operations and disinformation, which, by the way, these are the same people that said the 2016 election was rigged because of bots on Twitter, Russian bots. Isn't it only I think 3 to 5% of the American populace is on Twitter? And bots somehow influenced on Twitter the course of this nation? Isn't that just a ridiculous claim? So anyway, which is why we put out this adversary on the DDoS attack could and couldn't do. DDoS are low-level attacks that work by overwhelming websites with traffic to render them inaccessible. Given the prevalence of false claims that DDoS attacks in prior U.S. foreign elections, given the prevalence of false claims about DDoS attacks in prior U.S. and foreign elections, we are warning that what are they talking about there? I just don't know what they're specifically referencing. In foreign elections, we are warning the DDoS attack systems against election-related websites could temporarily disrupt access to some online election functions, like voter lookup tools, but would not prevent voting or compromise the integrity of the voting systems. The voting systems could never be, we just saw the whole world's computer systems crash because it was running Windows. And you think the magical voting computer is impenetrable? And for anyone, I'm sure I'm going to get comments like, well, Cameron, I actually worked on these and they're actually pretty good. It's technology. It's hacking. It's a cat and mouse game. There is no magical computer that can't be hacked. It's literally impossible. And if you don't, and it's not even hacked from a guy wearing a mask and with tools and with a computer and he's hacking into the mainframe. It could be as simple as someone who, I don't know, has a lot of money and influence saying, weigh things this way, just putting the hand on the scale a little bit. That's all it takes. This warning highlights the importance for voters to seek out information about how to vote prior to election day and demonstrates the FBI's and CISA's continued commitment to sharing information with the public and potential cyber threats. Blah, blah, blah. Let's go to the charts. What does the astrology have to say about this? The astrology says, this is why I'm considering a contingent election. So let's get to election day. It's this Mars-Pluto opposition, by the way. So the reason I haven't made my Mars retrograde video or my election video yet is I want to get after this Mercury retrograde. I want to have the eclipse and I want to have the Mars enter shadow period because there's a lot going on. So number one, Pluto's back in Capricorn, which right now the Dow is down 1,000 points in the past 2 days, just in time for Pluto to retrogress back into Capricorn. And everyone that wants the Fed to cut rates, every time the Fed has cut rates after putting them up is when the stock market crashes. So if the Fed cuts rates in September, you will see a stock market crash. Perfect timing for Pluto and Capricorn to return. Interesting. I don't know who that benefits. I don't know why they would time it that way. I don't know who that benefits. In in terms of like what's set in the election. But if you're not familiar, this winter we will have a Mars retrograde. It will station retrograde at 6 Leo, back at to 17 Cancer. Mars is going to go opposite Pluto here. So there's a lot of tension. Then Mars will go into Leo. And again, we have this Mars-Pluto still opposition. So we're looking at November 9th. The election is what, on Tuesday the 5th, I think? Sometime around then. But here's what happens immediately after. We have a Mercury retrograde. This is right as Pluto enters Aquarius. Mercury is retrograde in detriment in Sagittarius. And Mercury is literally the abacus, the let's count the numbers, let's double check everything. And it's in detriment in Sagittarius. Where are all these votes coming from? What is all this? And again, for the people, like, it doesn't matter what side you support here. It's the idea that, again, because again, if like the Dems win, Republicans are going to go crazy. And if the Republicans win, I genuinely believe the Dems will go crazy. Like you have to remember, we listened to 8 years of propaganda that Trump was somehow bought off by Russia, and yet zero evidence has shown up for that. And that was a big thing. The election denial started there. And don't even talk about Stacey Abrams from Georgia. Like, the election denial stuff is both ways. Both parties they do the exact same thing. They have the exact same tactics. They're both hypocrites. And it's okay to accept that. It's okay. You know what I'm saying? Well, but they did this. Whatever your party did, whatever the party you hate did, your party did too. And it's okay. Not that it's okay. It's more so it's okay to accept that. It's okay to take in that they actually both suck. They're both lying to you. Now, Mercury's going to go retrograde here, right? Shortly after, Mars is going to go retrograde. So when I look at these two things, and I try to think about, okay, well, who wins the election? Kamala Harris has these big ZR periods, but Trump gets this really big one. And again, I made a point of like, he's already been billionaire, celebrity, president before, and he's still not in the peak of his life? What the fuck? What else do you got to do? You did it all. What else do you have to do to be considered in the peak of your career? That could be president again. That also could be, again, facing assassination attempt and actually dying from that. That's what I'm a little bit more curious of. But here's the deal. This to me doesn't look like we have a solution. This to me doesn't look like we have an answer. And if you're not familiar with what a contingent election is, I did a whole video about it. I believe it was either on my World War III Civil War video or on the Kamala Harris video I did. I can't remember. One of those. But the idea is, if no one gets to 270, which I think is something that they can throttle, versus if it was Joe Biden and Trump, I genuinely believe Trump would win. But if it's Kamala Harris, big propaganda machine, versus Trump, I do think that they could throttle the votes to where no one gets 270, which would then go to a contingent election, which is when the House votes for the president and the Senate votes for a vice president. Long story short, though, but is it the House coming in or is it the House that's leaving? No one knows. There's no rules, by the way. The vice president could literally elect themselves, by the way. It's really bad. If a contingent election happens, it is literally what's the show I'm looking for? I can't think of a TV show off the top of my head, but it's literally a TV show. But this to me doesn't look like we have any answers, and it doesn't look like we accept those because this Mars retrograde is happening opposite Pluto. When you talk about Pluto, which is like power and corruption and fear and dark forces in the sign of the people, opposite Mars retrograding in Leo, like a Mars, anything Mars is fights and conflicts. You know, I see so many astrologers that say like Mars is energy and drive. Mars is violence first and foremost. Pick up any astrology book before the 1960s. Mars is violence. And it amazes me how many people just disregard that. But Mars is in Leo, the sign of, again, like the individual, the pride, the king, and it's retrograde. There's like this loss. There's this, again, I always look at Mars retrograde as like a tail being tucked between your legs. And it's opposite Pluto, where a lot of this to me is, I think no matter what, there's a lot of civil strife. My thing is, I really don't know what side this is going to be. Again, 5 minutes ago, I was saying, I really think Donald Trump would win against Joe Biden. I really do. In this case with Kamala, I don't know. The propaganda campaign is very high, and people might get upset that I'm calling it a propaganda campaign, but name me one policy. Name me one thing. You like people that are, again, people are only voting for Kamala because she's not Donald Trump. Sure, maybe she's the first black Indian woman, but like, it's really fucking racist to just vote someone off their skin color. It really fucking is. There's plenty of other great politicians of all races, of all genders, that might have actually really good policy or have really good ideas. But she hasn't said any of that. And again, they also want this race divide, and they want it to be about race because those are the things that divide us. When essentially we're all Americans at the end of the day. We don't have to be divided by race. But again, when you get a propaganda campaign 24/7 for the past 12, 15 years around race and racial tension and all that stuff, which started with Obama's second term, that's all stuff that you could look up to yourself. Of course, we're going to make it about race. And of course, it's racist to think anything other than race is the most, leading factor of any dispute. So I look at this as I don't think really anyone's happy. I still have money on a contingent election. However, I've gone back and forth with what I think about S.J. Anderson's video. He made a prediction that the Democrats would win. Now, if it goes into a contingent election, I think the Democrats are winning. And what I mean by the Democrats, again, it's not like, again, their preferred candidate and situation comes out, if that makes sense. However, I don't know if I can positively say I think Donald Trump beats Kamala. But my other thing is, I don't know if Kamala is the nominee. I want to see the DNC happen first. I really do. Especially she picks someone like Josh Shapiro, who is Jewish and is pro-Israel. Pulse check on the left. They're not really having that. And the young voter base is really important. And I would be curious if, again, there's a lot going on here. I don't think I'm not sitting here saying, oh, Kamala Harris definitely isn't the VP. I think, though, I want to see the DNC happen because all of this has happened in a Mercury shadow period squaring Uranus. This isn't the end. Like, this isn't like, oh, it's Kamala versus Trump. Bada bing, bada boom, we're done. There's a kind of a lot more to happen here. And I don't think we're going to know until Mercury leaves shadow, which is not until September 12th. September 11th, September 12th. So we've got some time. I think around this time is when I'll probably feel a little bit more confident in my prediction. Like I said, I've said this before, I'm more than 100% okay with being wrong on my predictions, but I would rather do my best as an astrologer to make predictions than be quiet about it. The worst thing too as an astrologer is when you make a prediction, but you're afraid to say it, and then you end up being right. You're like, why did I say it? So I still think contingent election is on the table. I want to see the Kamala Harris. I want to see the DNC, though. I want to see if she comes up. Either way, that does not negate the fact that I don't think this election is going to go well. That does not negate the fact that I don't think it's going to be 100% clear. For example, look at Bush v. Gore. That went to the Supreme Court, and we didn't really get a president until 2000. And, I mean, you can argue that that was kind of a rigged election, that it just kind of fell in the hands of when you look into that, that's not the best way we've ever handled an election. But not that I liked Gore, but just more so of that process sows the seeds of other things to come. But again, when you look at this article that just came out about DDoS attacks, and they're like, oh, it's totally going to be fine. Like, please don't ever question the election infrastructure. It's totally safe and secure, and it's totally democratic. We would never do anything, even though we do it to every fucking country ever. Again, I mean, like, look at what's going on in Venezuela. It's like the U.S. says the girl won, and everyone else says that the Maduro won. I don't know what to believe with that, to be honest with you. Like, when people are like, oh, the CIA wants to overthrow Maduro for their oil, I'm like, I understand that. But then when people are like, no, why would they want to vote communism? There's like a bunch of Venezuelans that came aboard to leave. I'm like, I can understand that. I have no opinion on the Venezuelan election right now besides, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't sometimes. America's got its problems, and I can know a little bit more about that. I had no idea about Venezuela. But this idea that they're starting to sow the seeds a little bit of, just the information is going to be a little wacky, just a little weird. But your vote totally matters, and it totally counts. It's safe and effective. Online voting is safe and effective. I love that line. We're all in this together. It's safe and effective. Don't question anything. So, how long are we going to take that one? How long are we going to take the it's safe and effective, don't question it, or your insert derogatory comment here. So that's what I just wanted to talk about. I think it's really interesting that they're saying there's going to be a bunch of issues with information, given that, let's see, I believe Mercury goes retrograde. Let me double check when Mercury goes into shadow. That's the other thing. I think Mercury enters shadow. Okay, 6/23. So I believe Mercury does enter shadow the day of the election. And by the way, why is that even important? Like, oh, it's just a Mercury retrograde. Yeah, the day of the election, the day after the election, Mercury enters shadow. All of this Kamala Harris stuff, Joe Biden stepping out. I mean, Trump was almost assassinated. I mean, right before Mercury went into shadow. So this is the Mercury retrograde before the next Mercury retrograde, which is during, again, Mercury enters shadow the day, the week after? Not the week after, 2 days after. So we get the results 2 days after, and it's just kind of like, oh, this is it. So hold on to your horses. We have a lot more to go. I'm okay with being wrong about a contingent election. When I look at everything, it's like, they don't want Trump to win, and I don't think Trump can win. Although I think if it was a free and fair election versus him and Joe Biden, it would. Same thing. I can't say about Kamala Harris, just because, again, there's a different kind of a campaign you can run for someone who's breathing and cognitively aware. At least I'll give her that. But yeah, it's not looking all that good, especially as we then go into, again, April of 2025. Really, March, April, May of 2025 is really all of the changes that we're going to start seeing really being forced. And again, we don't even have Mars leaving shadow until May of 2025. This is when we also get Saturn and Neptune in Aries. We get Uranus and Gemini. And it's one thing after another after this election. 2025 is going to be quite the change. And so the other thing is when I look at all of the changes that happen between now. So by the way, November through July of 24 to 25, every single planet moves into a new zodiac sign. You're probably not going to live in another time where you'll see that. Where, again, within 12 months, or what's actually, I think, within 6 months, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter all move into new zodiac signs. That's pretty impressive in terms of, like the whole story shifts. The whole thing happens. The whole story changes. That's another reason why I'm kind of wondering if it is Trump that wins. I think, by the way, for the people that think Trump's not going to get us into war, the video I mentioned earlier that I recorded but didn't put out is essentially choose your war. While I personally, I would think Trump would be a better president to have in a wartime, genuinely, that does not mean he's not going to get us into war. If you look at the astrology, war is on the menu. War is on the menu. Just pick one. Do we fight for Israel? Do me and all my bros go fight for Israel as, Goy and go die in Iran? Or do we go fight for NATO in Eastern Europe? Or, I don't think China, Taiwan's really on the menu as of right now. I think that might be like a 2029, 2030 thing. But, or whenever Saturn goes into Gemini, I forgot what year that is. This time, 2030, Saturn, Uranus, Mars, Gemini, this June, May of 2029. This is looking like more, I would probably say, global conflict stuff. But yeah, choose your war. I mean, again, that also involves for what's going on here at home too. I do think that you will see, I think I'm going to make a video about like how to quote unquote prepare for it. Both as like a clickbait thing, but more so of like, it's not going to be like the last Civil War. Learn about the Irish Revolution, learn about how insurgencies work, and occupying forces dealing with insurgencies. For the most part, life will be pretty normal. You might just see like an IED blow up a random car like somewhere and be like, what was that? Life will go on as normal, but there will just be there will clearly be like an underground war going on. Maybe there's battles and skirmishes, but I don't think that will be the thing. I think what you'll probably more likely see is something really similar to the Irish Revolution, which was back in 80s, 90s, sometime around then. And and more so like states not listening to the federal government start making moves to where, again, it's not that they like declare secession, but in everything but wording, that's what they're doing. So that's where I'm at with it. I'll make a video about that as too. I really want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Something I love about my audience is I have a very right-wing audience and a very left-wing audience. I really enjoyed, I believe, the Neptune and Aries video I made about 5th generational warfare. And I had people on both sides comment. And, you know, again, I am a human being. I have my biases. I've shared that with people. And rather than being like, oh, I'm going to be unbiased, like, I'm fucking biased. Okay. Like we all are. I can look at the astrology and tell you, I don't like how things are looking. I think no matter what, again, I can just see a situation in which Kamala wins, and that upsets the right, and that's where you see a lot of more of the violence. However, I can also see that with Donald Trump winning, there is a lot of hate around Project 2025, and even though that's not his campaign, sure, the Heritage Foundation has some influence, but like I just don't really believe it. I can imagine the left having some major issues with that, and that just sows the seeds of deeper conflict. So again, more than willing to be wrong, more than willing to be right. But I just wanted to do this video because I don't care for this article saying, oh yeah, start preparing now for things to look a little funky with information. Oh, whoopsie doo. But your computer voting machine is totally fucking. We've got that unlocked. No one. It's the unhackable machine. It's just funny to me. Like people that think that the election is free to fair. It's just like, okay, and no one can hack into your laptop, right? This is so super secret. No one could ever fucking get into it. It's just ridiculous. There's so many things that they can do. It's just a matter of who, what, how. Like again, if it's like, you know, Kamala Harris gets 120 million votes and Trump gets 80 million votes, 200 million people did not vote. You know what I mean? They can only do so much. So anyway, let me know what your guys' thoughts are below. I just didn't like this article, and I wanted to make a video about just the whole Kamala situation, as I don't necessarily think that this has all happened during Mercury shadow squaring Uranus. I don't really know if she's going to be the person after the DNC. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, if she picks someone like Josh Shapiro and you get all the Palestinian protesters and we have, again, like just like 1968, a bunch of riots and stuff like that, that might be that might change. So, more of this is to come. I will be making a full video about my election predictions. That will be later after this Mercury retrograde period. And yeah, very much appreciate you guys, and I'll be seeing you next time.